Earth didn't die with thunder. It died with silence. There were no heroes in the streets, no final speech, no countdown or defiance from the broken mouth of a leader. The end came as a whisper, smothered in fire. The skies cracked open above Beijing, London, Sao Paulo. They came in black ships, shaped like blades, cutting through clouds with eerie precision. The first volley didn't hit military bases. It hit orphanages, schools, hospitals. Not to win a war, but to erase a soul. By the third day, oceans boiled with orbital plasma strikes. By the fourth, satellite grids fell from the heavens like metal rain. On the sixth, Earth's AI core, thought invincible, went dark. And on the seventh, Earth made no sound. 7 billion lives. Gone. They didn't call it war. They called it species sanitation. A clean term. A scientific phrase to excuse planetary-scale genocide. The Galactic Concord didn't send a message. It sent cleansing units, biothermal drones, virus fogs, sonic shatters that turned glass into shrapnel and bones into mist. It wasn't personal. It was efficient. The aliens that commanded this purge looked like God to some, 7 feet tall, plated in armor like living tanks, with eyes that glowed blue and cold as vacuum. They walked Earth's smoldering crust with no resistance, no remorse, just reports, logged by machines, reviewed with dispassion. Their general stood on the ruins of New York City, once the beating heart of human pride, and smiled. He raised a cup crafted from melted titanium, poured himself wine distilled from the blood of Earth's oceans, and toasted to the stars. The vermin had been cleaned. But Earth, the real Earth, hadn't finished its sentence yet. Buried in orbit, far beyond Mars' frozen reach, forgotten beneath layers of encryption so deep not even Earth's last firewall accessed it, one protocol remained. A ghost locked in steel and cryo, unreachable by diplomacy or diplomacy's collapse. Protocol Black Fang. And on the moment Earth's biosphere reached zero, a signal was triggered. A heartbeat in space. Outer Vault, Black Site K0X, 470 million miles from Earth. Beneath the ice shadow of Europa, in a coffin forged from titanium and motor, a man opened his eyes. He didn't gasp. He didn't scream. He simply woke. Name, Gideon Graves. Rank, Navy SEAL. Status, killed in action, 20 years ago. Reality, locked in cryo with kill command hard-coded into his DNA. Sensors around him pulsed. Data fed into his cortex. Visual footage, audio snippets, satellite recordings of Earth's execution, and then, the final straw, a broadcast from the Galactic Concord itself. A laugh. Not just any laugh. An alien commander, sitting on the burned remnants of Earth's flag, urinating over it for the cameras. They aired it to mock the dead. They aired it to humiliate survivors. Gideon stared at the image, unblinking. His veins pulsed blue, nanits activating, muscle memory syncing with combat software buried in his spine. His heartbeat tripled. Not from fear, from fury. Welcome back, soldier. A voice spoke through the cryo chamber's intercom. Soft, female, synthetic, Athena 7, his old mission AI. World population, 0. Final global heartbeat, terminated. Authorization granted. Lethal vendetta. Would you like to begin planetary cleansing? Gideon said nothing. He stepped from the pod, the frost steaming off his chest, each movement controlled, lethal, surgical. His body was a weapon, grown in pain, tempered in war, and now, sharpened by grief. He walked past weapons vaults and didn't bother to stop, because he didn't need guns. DAC space navigation, 30 minutes later. Gideon stood on the hull of a stolen strike pod, staring at the stars, a canvas he once bled for, now tainted by tyrants. He could have waited. He could have gathered allies. He could have formed plans. But he wasn't built for politics. He was built for payback. And vengeance doesn't wait. Nexus Prime, Galactic High Command Fortress. While Earth's ashes still floated in its orbit, Nexus Prime, the center of Galactic Concord Authority, hosted its annual Extinction Gala. They toasted to peace, danced with humans in chains, twinks in silk collars, genetically modified for pleasure, paraded like trophies in cages made of glass and shame. One twink, pale, Sharp-jawed, collar around his neck, was auctioned to a three-headed senator from the Velkin system for 30,000 credits. Another was forced to sing Earth's anthem as a joke. They laughed when he cried. They thought the horror was over. They were wrong. Impact detected. 0001. A single object breached Nexus Prime's orbital perimeter. No identification code. No heat signature. Just a black dot, falling. Alien officers stared at the feed, confused. What is that? Some kind of junk. Let it hit. They should have known better. It didn't hit. It pierced. Like a dagger thrown by a forgotten god, the pod split open in the main atrium of the palace. Smoke billowed out. Alarms flared. Elite soldiers raised rifles. Nothing. Just steam. Silence. Then, the first scream. The alien nearest the pod collapsed, his head split down the middle like a cracked melon. No one saw the movement, only the aftermath. The second guard fired. Too late. Gideon Graves stepped into view. Shirtless. Bleeding. Calm. His body was covered in scars. Some old, some fresh, some still sizzling with alien energy. One eye burned white, not with light, but with rage coded into neurons. He didn't run. He walked. A four-armed Velshar lunge. Gideon caught one arm, snapped it backwards, then rammed the broken bone through its own throat. He used the corpse as a shield, flung it into a cluster of guards, and launched. 10 seconds later, 15 soldiers were dead. One split vertically. Another folded backwards over a staircase. He moved like fire with direction. Control chaos. Galactic broadcast interrupted. Every Concorde screen flickered. Blood splattered across lenses. Then came a face. Human. Dirty. Scarred. Gideon Graves. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need one. He played a clip, a child's last scream on Earth, cut short by fire. Then his voice, low, surgical, soft as death. You erased my planet. You paraded our dead. Now I erase you. Then the screen went black. The broadcast ended in silence. And silence, finally, belonged to Earth. Nexus Prime didn't smell like victory. It reeked of rot disguised as perfume. Gold-plated towers stretched in the artificial sky, pulsing with light harvested from stars consumed and enslaved. The Central District was known as the Garden of Obedience, a lavish horror show. Alien senators walked across marble carved from destroyed worlds. Inside the Palace of Chains, the elite gathered, high generals, corrupt lords, and noble tyrants sipping Lumina wine while watching the downfall of lesser species in holographic replays. And now, with Earth turned to ash, it was time to celebrate. Music swelled. A band composed of modified twinks with vocal cords tuned to galactic frequencies stood on a glowing stage, singing lullabies about extinction. One boy, pale skin, sharp cheekbones, body barely clothed in silver, stumbled while adjusting his collar. A handler slapped him across the face and dragged him back into line. Blood spilled. Laughter followed. Earth wasn't a tragedy here. It was entertainment. A drunken Lord Velkara raised a glass of molten pink liquor. To humanity, may they burn better next time. They all laughed, even as death walked among them. They never saw him enter. No sensors triggered. No gates breached. No alarm sounded. The Palace of Chains was secured by the most advanced security systems in 5 galaxies. Nothing entered unnoticed. Nothing except him. Gideon Graves had arrived. He wore a black cloak stolen from the corpse of a Velkin priest. His feet were bare. His eyes were dead. No guard stopped him. Those who tried now lay in twisted shapes in the alleys of Nexus Prime, unseen, unburied, unspoken of. He didn't kick open doors. He walked through them. He didn't make threats. He made examples. Atrium of the Damned, 2304 local time. The music stopped. For a second, no one understood why. Then screams erupted. A severed head landed on the banquet table. Still blinking. Still dripping. General Cross stood, armored and furious, barking orders in 3 dialects at once. Too late. Gideon moved through the crowd like a plague given purpose. A blur of fists and jagged steel. His cloak dropped, revealing a body not covered in armor, but in blood. Scars burned across his chest. His hands wrapped in makeshift gauntlets made from the bones of his enemies. He didn't waste bullets. He didn't use bombs. He used precision. One alien reached for a plasma blade. Gideon crushed its wrist, turned the blade inward, and buried it in the thing's stomach. Another attempted to flee. Gideon picked up a table leg, splintered it through the runner's throat, and pinned him to the glass floor. Then he walked forward, through the blood-soaked banquet, the screams echoing off crystal chandeliers. One by one, the survivors realized there was no rescue. The auction room. They tried to hide the boys. The twinks, 100 of them, chained, bruised, genetically tampered for pleasure and resale. Some barely old enough to speak. Others too broken to scream. They were the real currency of the Concord, beautiful, obedient, disposable. Gideon found them behind a sealed barrier, guarded by an elite paladin-class juggernaut. 9 feet of armored brutality. The beast roared. Gideon didn't flinch. The two collided in a shockwave of force. Metal shattered. Marble cracked. Gideon ducked a hammer strike that would have snapped a warhorse in two. He grabbed the chain around his own wrist, the one he'd been dragging like a leash, and whipped it forward. It wrapped the juggernaut's arm. Gideon pulled. Hard, and the beast's elbow exploded backward in a pop of blood and sparks. He didn't finish with a bullet. He crushed the alien's skull with a piece of its own armor. And then, silence. The door opened. The boys stared. Some afraid, some too numb to even blink. Gideon stood there, soaked in alien blood, body steaming, eyes burning, and spoke for the first time in hours. "You're free." One boy collapsed. Another whispered, "Is he real?" Gideon reached into the corner and grabbed a ceremonial banner, the flag of the Galactic Concord. He tore it in half and threw it to the ground. "Get dressed. You're soldiers now." 20 minutes later, the entire upper floor of the Palace of Chains burned. Gideon led the boys through the halls of luxury and slavery like a storm of judgment. They were quiet, eyes wide. Some held knives. Others simply followed the rhythm of his footsteps like worshippers trailing a god made of vengeance. More guards arrived. He didn't tell the boys to run. He threw them forward. They didn't hesitate. One twink lunged at a guard and stabbed him 17 times with a broken wine glass. Another wrapped a silk leash around an alien's throat and didn't stop choking until the alien stopped moving. They were more than survivors now. They were revenants. The grand balcony. Gideon stepped into the open, 200 stories above Nexus Prime. The Capitol's light sprawled below him like veins of a living corpse. Behind him, flames consumed the Palace of Chains. Screams, fire, collapse. A line of elite alien nobles, 13 of them, crawled backward along the balcony, cornered, drenched in wine, blood, and the stench of fear. What are you?" one of them spat, trembling. Gideon stepped forward. "I'm Earth's obituary." Then he hurled one of them off the balcony. The others followed, some screaming, some begging, none flying. A message to the stars. Gideon raised a severed alien head and turned toward the nearest security drone still broadcasting. He crushed the skull in one hand, letting the ooze drip down his fingers. "This is not terrorism. This is arithmetic. 7 billion lives. You owe a debt. I've come to collect." And with that, he vanished, into smoke, into flame, into myth. Aftermath. The next morning, the Garden of Obedience lay in ruins. The twinks? Gone. The nobles? Dead. The systems? Offline. For the first time in 3 centuries, Nexus Prime declared emergency martial law. And across the galaxy, footage leaked. Twinks in blooded silk collars walking free, alien dignitaries begging for mercy as their throats were slit, and a single human, shirtless, broken, burning, delivering death with mathematical precision. They dubbed him the Butcher of Chains, the Ghost of Earth, the Navy SEAL that didn't die. But Gideon wasn't a ghost. He was the start of a storm, and it had just begun. His name was whispered across star systems like a curse. Gideon Graves, the last Navy SEAL, the dead man who walked, the man who burned Nexus Prime, who tore the Palace of Chains to ash, who left a trail of mutilated alien ability and freed twinks wielding blood-slick chains. But Part 3 of Gideon's saga began not with a kill, but with a silence, 2 weeks after the fall of Nexus Prime. Galactic Concord Supreme Intelligence, the artificial nexus mind that governed law, fleet movement, and economic control across 900 planets, had gone offline. Not hacked, not shut down, severed. Data streams bled like arteries from the command core. Servers cracked open. One by one, systems crashed. Warships in orbit went dark, weapons disabled, navigation frozen mid-drift. Someone, or something, had walked into the black orbit core and made the universe bleed. The only image recovered from the security feeds? A single human silhouette, standing in the dark. No armor, no army, just rage. Velshar Mining Ring, 3.2 billion miles from Nexus Prime. Velshar 9 was known as a slaughter wheel, a deep space asteroid chain turned into a floating gulag where captured humans were sent for decomposition labor. Every day, hundreds died in the mines. Air was rationed. Sleep cycles denied. Anyone who resisted was executed via public spectacle. Twinks fetched higher prices on Velshar 9. Their slim bodies were more efficient in tight tunnels, and they cried prettier. The gods like that. They didn't expect a visitor. Not here. Not him. Arrival, 3:43 system time. A cargo freighter drifted into the loading dock. No transponder. No crew manifest. No replies to hails. Security teams approached. Doors hissed open. Empty. Then something hit the floor. A skull. Still wet. Cracked open. A chain dragged behind it, blood-soaked and heavy. Then came the second thing, something no god could process. A human, standing upright, naked from the waist up, scarred, covered in ritual glyphs that glowed faintly red beneath his skin. His wrists were wrapped in bone-white gauntlets. His left hand held a blade shaped like a human rib. Gideon Graves. And hell followed. The massacre of Velshar 9. The first 5 god didn't fire. They laughed. They shouldn't have. Gideon leapt forward, faster than logic. The first throat he slit with a rib blade. The second he grabbed by the jaw and crushed with one hand. The third tried to scream. Gideon stuffed the broken remains of the second god's femur into his mouth. The fourth and fifth never made it past the panic trigger. He moved like liquid death. Every motion a dance choreographed in war. By the time the emergency klaxons howled, 60 bodies had fallen. Some were torn open, others decapitated. One was hanging from a light fixture by their own intestines. But Gideon didn't stop with guards. He went to the control center. Security AI begged for parley. It tried logic, then threats, then pleas. Please, this facility is legally protected under. So is Earth. Gideon growled. He ripped the AI core out of its housing and snapped it in half like a bone. The mines vented the vacuum. The facility screamed. Cell block theta. They found him in shadows. Twinks chained to railings, forced a mine until their fingers split open and their lungs bled from sulfuric exposure. Some didn't believe he was real. One boy whispered, "I saw him on the feed. Here's a ghost." Gideon knelt in front of him. Ghosts don't kill gods. He picked up a drop plasma cutter and sliced through every chain in the room. When he reached the last prisoner, he handed the cutter over. "You know what to do." And the boy, trembling, wide-eyed, nodded. The rise of the chain-born. They didn't just escape. They turned. Twinks with scars and missing teeth became warriors. They stormed guard rooms with sharpened drills and mining carts retrofitted with blades. Gideon led from the front, not like a general, but like a firestorm. Every dead warden's armor was repurposed. Every punishment column melted into shrapnel. Every last slave became something new. The chain-born, Earth's revenge given breath. Galactic response, 12 hours later. Admiral Korik of the Galactic Concord stood aboard the Dreadnought Tyrant's Halo, watching a 3D reconstruction of the Velshar 9 massacre. He didn't blink as the feed showed Gideon stabbing a Velkan officer through the spine with his bare hands. He turned to his second-in-command. "This man, Graves, he's not a soldier. He's a disease. He's a myth," the commander whispered. "A relic. He should have died 20 years ago." Korik slammed his fist on the control panel. "He's killing our future." They sent assassins. The best. Velkan shadows. Uzarian bone dancers. A Fasari phase walker who could kill by walking through your thoughts. None survived. One left a message on his own skin before dying, carved with a rusted blade. I saw his eyes. There's no mercy. They sent a fleet, 1,200 ships, 90,000 soldiers, all to intercept one man and his growing army of former slaves. They tracked him to the black orbit, a dead space corridor so warped by gravity and debris that no sane fleet entered. They launched missiles, swept radar, deployed stealth drones. Nothing, just quiet. Then power outages, then internal sabotage, then screams. Gideon had boarded them before they even realized he was there. Not one ship survived. Broadcast intercept, Universal Channel 1. The galaxy watched. A feed taken from a bridge camera on the dreadnought Vengeance Stalker. Shaky, damaged, but clear enough to show one man, drenched in blood, dragging a general by the neck. He held the general to the camera. You wiped out a world. Now I'm wiping out yours. And with a flick, Gideon tore the general's throat out and hurled the body at the camera. The feed cut. The galaxy reacts. Worlds began to panic. News headlines screamed. The Butcher of Black Orbit claims another sector. Twink Army liberates Slaver Ring. Declares war. Navy SEAL sparks collapse of Central Galactic Order. Even planets that supported the Concord began to question their allegiance. Whisper spread. Gideon Graves was not a terrorist. He was justice. He was a mirror the galaxy refused to look into. And he was coming, aboard the Chainborn flagship. He sat in the dark, alone. One boy entered, the same twink who once sang Earth's anthem in chains. Now, he wore light armor. His voice was steady. They are calling you the Butcher. Gideon didn't look up. Good. They're afraid. Gideon stood. They should be. He had no planet, but the stars burned for him. Gideon Graves was no longer a man. He was a cataclysm in motion. Across 75 star systems, fleets crumbled. Armored battalions vanished into smoke. Slave rings collapsed beneath the boots of twinks once sold as flesh. Now reborn as Chainborn, scarred and lethal. But one name hadn't yet been crossed out. General Zorkul, the architect of Earth annihilation. While planets burned and boys rose in revolt, Zorkul lived like a god, deep inside the garden spire on the moon of Luxia 9, a palace of emerald towers, hovering waterfalls, and caged humans used as decorative exotics. No alarms, no defense fleets, no fear, because Zorkul believed the Navy SEAL couldn't reach him. That was his last mistake. Garden Spire, Luxia 9, Sanctuary of the Supreme. The Garden Spire was 20 miles high, its walls covered in flora that only bloomed once every century. 1,000 guards patrolled its terraces. Automated sentries orbited in cloak mode. Orbital scanned every incoming vessel. Nothing could enter undetected, except death itself. Because Gideon didn't fly in. He walked in, wrapped in a priest's skin, torn from the throat of a Velkin monk. Hood low, eyes dead. On his back, a sack made of scorched Concord flags. Inside it, the heads of 2 admirals and the hearts of 3 AI governors. When security stopped him at the gate, he offered the bag. A gift from the Chainborn. They opened it, and he opened them. A blade shaped like a broken spinal column whipped through the air, slicing one guard's jaw clean off. Another got half a scream out before Gideon's foot collapsed his sternum inward. The third died screaming as Gideon shoved a serrated relic blade through his eye and twisted. The gates opened with blood. The garden within. They called it Heaven's Womb, a field of engineered beauty laid in cruelty. The grass shimmered with starlight particles. Flowers whispered music. Trees bore synthetic fruit that tasted like nostalgia. And in the middle, surrounded by waterfalls and silk-robed attendants, sat General Zorkul, 10 feet tall, gold-plated armor, 4 arms, eyes like dying stars. 2 twinks, barely older than 16, massaged his shoulders, trembling, wearing nothing but ink. He didn't know Gideon had arrived. Yet, one by one, Gideon didn't charge. He moved like a phantom, low, silent, untouchable. He slit the throats of the outer guard with wire forged from warship cables. He tore another's spine out through their back and used it as a whip. A passing concubine gasped. Gideon grabbed her gently, pressed a finger to her lips. "You're free now." Hide. She did. He was surgical. The last two guards stood outside Zorkol's chamber doors, weapons drawn, postures bored. Gideon let them blink. That was their last mistake. He flung a carved femur blade into the first one's eye socket. The guard spasmed, choked, and dropped. The second stepped back, stammered, fired. Gideon moved. The shot missed. His boot didn't. It crushed the alien's jaw, then his throat, then snapped his spine in one fluid motion. The doors opened without a sound, and Gideon stepped through. Showdown in paradise. Zorko looked up, smiled. Ah, the human, the ghost. I was wondering when you'd come. He rose, towering, monstrous, draped in silken trophies. I watched Earth die. I remember the screams. Beautiful, really, your kind burn so soft. Gideon said nothing, just reached into his cloak and threw something at Zorko's feet. A charred child shoe. Her name was Lyra. She was 6. Zorko stared, then laughed. A deep, inhuman roar. You came all this way, for a child. Gideon's face didn't change. His voice was ice. No, he stepped forward. I came for you. The fight. Zorko moved first, a blur of golden fury. 4 plasma blades extended from hidden gauntlets. He struck like a hurricane. Gideon dodged, ducked, rolled, striking in between with fists like mallets and precision honed by war. The air shimmered with the heat of their blows. A fountain exploded behind them. A plasma strike nearly took Gideon's head off, but he rolled beneath and hurled a chain hook into Zorko's side, embedding it deep. He yanked. Zorko stumbled, and Gideon was already inside his guard. He punched the alien across the jaw, bone cracking, then drove a serrated elbow blade into his thigh. Zorko roared, backhanded Gideon through a statue. Blood sprayed. But Gideon stood, wiped his lip. Is that it? Brutality. Zorko unleashed a scream that shattered glass walls. He lunged. Gideon grabbed his wrist, turned the force against him, and twisted until the bone cracked. He pivoted behind the general, slammed his head into the ground, and drove his knife into the base of his skull. Not enough to kill, just to hurt. Zorko screamed again. Gideon whispered, "This is for Earth." Then he ripped the general's arm off. The alien thrashed, blood gushing like a geyser. Gideon pinned him down with a broken spear and slowly, methodically, crushed the general's ribs under his knee, one by one, until Zorko wheezed like a dying dog. The execution. Zorko tried to crawl. He tried to beg. Please. I was ordered. It wasn't. Gideon didn't listen. He grabbed the general by his last remaining arm, dragged him across the garden, and lifted him before a wide recording drone hovering above, broadcasting to every system in the Concord. The entire galaxy watched. Watched the monster who destroyed Earth become prey. Gideon looked into the lens. You burned my world. You caged our children. You turned our boys into currency. He looked at Zorko. Now you burn. He shoved a live incendiary grenade down Zorko's throat and kicked him into a reflecting pool. The explosion tore the garden apart in a blooming fireball of justice. The last thing the galaxy saw was Gideon, bathed in blood, smoke rising behind him, walking away without a word. Aftermath. Luxire 9 declared a planetary day of silence. The garden spire lay in ruins. Zorko's body never recovered. His palace reduced to molten glass and ash. All the slaves? Freed. The Chainborn arrived in drop pods to recover the survivors and torch the Concord's wealth. No mercy. No monuments. Only vengeance. The message. The Concord sent out one last desperate transmission. Negotiate. Parley. Ceasefire. Gideon didn't reply. He carved his response into the hull of a captured warship. You killed a world. I'm killing a galaxy. The galaxy had one final weapon. Denial. They still called him an anomaly, a relic, a single man, a virus they could sterilize if they just hit hard enough. They told themselves the last Navy SEAL couldn't break the entire Concord. Then the stars started going out, one by one, world by world. And Gideon Graves didn't hide. He walked through fire, leading an army of once enslaved boys turned executioners, the Chainborn, now armed with war tech, trauma, and nothing left to lose. He was no longer the ghost of Earth. He was its scream. Sector 9B Delta, Concord Fortress World, Zeron Prime. The High Senate met beneath 12 miles of titanium alloy shielding, buried under oceans, guarded by 6 planetary fleets. They were still arguing. We must sue for peace. Peace with a human? Impossible. This is a war criminal. No, this is a force of extinction. While they argued, the lights dimmed. A scent crept through the vents, burnt oil. Then the power failed. Silence fell like a guillotine. And a voice spoke through every comlink, every security drone, every feed. Gideon Graves, this is not a negotiation. This is not diplomacy. This is your final warning. A hologram flickered. Him. Eyes dead. Chest bare. Blood dried on fists. You killed 7 billion. I'm here to balance the ledger. And then the screaming started. The fall of Zeron Prime. He didn't come in through the airlocks. He came through the planet's core. Using stolen Concord tunneling tech, Gideon and the Chainborn bored upward, like a virus rising from the planet's bones. Explosives ruptured containment zones. Subflues flooded with flame. And then he rose from the smoke, covered in soot and fire, dragging twin plasma sabers looted from the bodies of 10 high executioners. The Chainborn followed, silent, shirtless, eyes wide with justice and madness. Most were twinks who'd once served drinks on leashes. Now they wielded bone knives and shrapnel cannons. The Senate tried to run. They didn't get far. One senator was disemboweled with a golden centerpiece. Another tried to bribe Gideon with 10 million credits. You think I kill for money? Gideon whispered and shoved his hand down the alien's throat until it came out the back of his neck. They found the High Chancellor weeping behind a false wall. He didn't even fight. The broadcast had changed everything. Gideon stood atop the ruins of Zeron Prime's capital tower. Fire engulfed the skyline. The galaxy watched via hijacked broadcast lines. Behind him, Chainborn soldiers held banners made of Concord general skins, stitched together into a flag. They burned it on camera. Gideon spoke into the lens. For every heartbeat Earth lost, I take a world. For every child you enslaved, I raise a soldier. For every lie you told, I leave ashes. He paused, and then, with perfect clarity, this is not a rebellion. This is extinction with intent. Panic grips the stars. Overnight, Concord Command collapsed. Entire planetary systems seceded. Armadas deserted. Factories stopped building weapons and started building altars, not to gods, but to Gideon Graves, the man who burned empires for memory's sake. Alien mothers told their children, behave, or the human will come. They weren't joking. Even elite warlords abandoned the Concord, sending frantic pleas. We did not vote for Earth's destruction. We are innocent. Gideon's answer came fast. You stood silent. That's enough. And then their skies turned black. The Concord's final gambit, the Omega Fleet, 1,200 warships, 70 capital dreadnoughts, AI-controlled destroyers with sun-eating beam arrays, a weapon known only as the Starblight, said to convert gravity into fire. Their target? Gideon Graves. Their goal? Erase him from existence. The trap? The Omega Fleet cornered him in the T-Caron Waste, an asteroid field orbiting a dying dwarf star. Nowhere to run. No Chainborn vessels in sight. Just one small human craft. Crippled. Faint energy signal. Admirals laughed. He dies tonight. They launched every weapon. Torpedoes. Gravity shells. Firestorms. The ship vanished in a silent, perfect explosion. They celebrated. They didn't see the other thing. The counterstrike, the Black Avalanche. The Chainborn had mined the asteroid field. Not with bombs, with themselves. Thousands of stealth pods launched, each one housing a former slave. A twink-turned killer, silent, patient, precise. As the Omega Fleet fired on the decoy ship, the Chainborn swarmed them. Pods cracked open. Chainborn soldiers launched themselves onto enemy hulls, blades in hand, fury in their blood. They boarded dreadnoughts barehanded. They crawled through vents. They slaughtered crews in their bunks. They didn't want ships. They wanted corpses. Gideon emerged from the darkness aboard one of the flagship destroyers. "Not dead, just delayed. You spent stars to kill one man," he whispered, voice piped into every enemy bridge. "Now I'll bury you inside them." The end of the Omega Fleet. It didn't take a day. It took 4 hours. When it was over, the Concorde's greatest force drifted in silence, burned, broken, bleeding. One ship tried to flee. Gideon chased it alone, in a stolen torpedo, breached the hull at full speed, and personally snapped the Admiral's spine while the crew screamed. Final transmission to the galaxy. Gideon stood atop the wreckage of the Omega flagship. Blood soaked his skin. The twin sabers glowed behind his back. He stared into the galaxy and gave Earth its eulogy. "You destroyed my home. You turned humans into animals. You sold our sons. You laughed while our city screamed. Now you understand. Now you feel it." He raised a fist. "This isn't war. It's judgment. And you just ran out of time." 1 week later, Concorde Command officially collapsed. Planets once loyal flew the Chainborn's black and crimson insignia. The Twinks once bored in cages now ran defense fleets. The memory of Earth was etched in every flag, every blade, every scream echoing through former halls of power. Epilogue: the grave of stars. They say Gideon disappeared after the last fleet fell. Some say he walked into a neutron storm, alone, smiling. Others claim he sleeps inside Earth's remains, buried in black sand. The Chainborn still wait for his return. They call him not a man, but a myth wrapped in muscle and vengeance. And sometimes, when a system gets greedy, when a slavery appears, when a noble forgets Earth's scream, they find their walls broken, their gods dead, and a single word carved into their throne. Seal,